The gunshot split the stillness of the Montana twilight like lightning, sending a flock of birds scattering across the crimson sky. Sophia Reynolds ducked behind a boulder, her heart hammering against her ribs as she tried to catch her breath. She'd been running for hours, since escaping from the stagecoach robbery that had left the driver and her traveling companions dead. The memory of their lifeless eyes staring up at the cloudless blue sky made her stomach turn as she pressed her back against the cool stone. Montana Territory, 1876. Sophia had come west with dreams of a teaching position in Helena, and a fresh start after the devastating loss of her parents to influenza back in Boston. At 22, she had been determined to forge her own path, refusing the marriage proposals of men who saw her only as a convenient addition to their households. Now, as the sun began its descent behind the rugged peaks of the distant mountains, she wondered if her independence would cost her everything. Her ivory traveling dress was torn and stained with dirt and sweat. The elegant boots that had seemed so practical in the Boston Mercantile now pinched her swollen feet. One of the three bandits had recognized the quality of her clothing and jewelry, marking her as a woman of means. They'd been pursuing her across the rolling hills for hours. "Cannot rest," Sophia whispered to herself, forcing her aching legs to carry her forward. Must find shelter before nightfall. The terrain grew more rugged as she climbed, sharp rocks and twisted roots threatening to trip her with every step. Her hair had long since fallen from its careful arrangement, the copper strands whipping around her face in the strengthening wind. The bandits' voices had faded behind her, but Sophia knew better than to assume they'd given up their pursuit, not when they believed she carried valuables. As darkness claimed the land, the temperature dropped precipitously. Her thin jacket offered little protection against the chill mountain air. Exhaustion pulled at her limbs like weights, making each step more difficult than the last. When she stumbled upon a small clearing sheltered by a stand of pines, Sophia knew she could go no further. Just a short rest, she promised herself, gathering pine needles into a fragrant cushion. Just until dawn. The stars emerged overhead, diamond bright against the velvet blackness. Sophia curled into herself, trying to conserve what little warmth remained in her body. Her eyelids grew heavy as the adrenaline that had sustained her began to fade. The last thing she remembered was the mournful howl of a distant wolf before exhaustion claimed her. Owen McCready had been tracking the stagecoach bandits for 3 days. As the newly appointed Deputy Marshal for the territory, he'd made it his personal mission to bring the Blackwell Gang to justice. They'd hit 4 coaches in the past month, killing indiscriminately and terrorizing travelers throughout the region. This latest robbery had been their most brazen yet, occurring in broad daylight on a well-traveled route. The trail had led him high into the foothills, away from the main road. At first, he'd assumed they were heading for their usual hideout in the abandoned mining camp near Rattlesnake Creek, but the tracks told a different story. 3 horses had split from the main group, following what appeared to be the trail of a single person on foot. "What are you boys chasing?" Owen muttered to himself, studying the ground in the fading light. His experienced eyes picked out the delicate impression of a woman's boot among the hoofprints and disturbed earth. His jaw tightened. The Blackwell Gang wasn't known for leaving witnesses, but they had a reputation for far worse when it came to female travelers. Owen urged his stallion forward, following the trail with grim determination. Twilight was rapidly giving way to full darkness, making tracking nearly impossible, but the moon was full enough to illuminate the path. The trail led him up a steep incline, through a dense stand of pines, and into a small clearing. He would have missed her entirely if not for a chance glance to his right. A flash of pale fabric among the shadows caught his eye. Owen dismounted silently, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip as he approached. The sight that greeted him drove the breath from his lungs. A woman lay curled on her side, copper hair spilling across the pine needles like liquid fire in the moonlight. Her face was smudged with dirt, her once fine dress torn and stained, but even in repose, there was a delicate strength to her features that made Owen pause. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale with cold in the chilly mountain air. "Madam," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. When she didn't stir, Owen knelt beside her, noting the bluish tinge to her lips and the slight trembling of her limbs. "Madam, can you hear me?" She remained unconscious, clearly exhausted beyond waking. With a quick glance around the clearing, Owen made his decision. The Blackwell Gang was still out there, likely searching for this woman, and she would die of exposure if left alone through the night. Owen shrugged out of his heavy leather duster and gently laid it over her still form. The coat nearly swallowed her slight frame, but would provide the warmth she desperately needed. He couldn't risk moving her yet, not when the bandits might be nearby, and not when she was in such a fragile state. "Rest easy, madam," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "You're safe now." Owen retrieved his bedroll from his saddlebags and set up a small camp nearby. He didn't dare light a fire; the smoke would give away their position, but he arranged himself between the woman and the clearing's entrance, his Winchester rifle across his lap. Whatever had brought this woman to these mountains alone, whatever she was running from, Owen McCready had appointed himself her protector until dawn. The stars wheeled overhead as the night deepened. Occasionally, Owen would check on the sleeping woman, reassured by the color gradually returning to her cheeks as his coat provided the warmth she needed. In the silver moonlight, with her copper hair spread around her like a halo, she reminded him of a painting he'd once seen in a fancy scent. "Louis Hotel, some Renaissance angel, peaceful yet strong. Who are you?" he whispered to the night. "And what kind of trouble are you in?" Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong and the gradual warming of the air. Sophia stirred beneath the unfamiliar weight covering her body, consciousness returning in fragments. The scent of leather, tobacco, and pine filled her nostrils, masculine but not unpleasant. Her eyes fluttered open to find a heavy coat draped across her, far too large to be her own. Panic seized her as memory returned. The stagecoach, the robbery, her desperate flight through the wilderness. Sophia bolted upright, the coat falling to her lap as she frantically scanned her surroundings. "Easy there," came a deep voice from a few feet away. "You're safe." Sophia whirled toward the sound, her heart racing. A man sat with his back against a pine tree, a rifle balanced across his knees. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. A silver badge gleamed on his vest. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse from thirst and disuse. "Deputy Marshal Owen McCready, madam." He tipped his hat slightly. "And you're the only survivor of yesterday's stagecoach robbery, I reckon." Sophia swallowed hard, memories of the attack flooding back. "How did you find me?" "Been tracking the Blackwell Gang for days." Owen rose smoothly to his feet, moving slowly as if not to startle her. "Found their tracks splitting off, following a woman on foot. That would be you, I take it." Sophia nodded, gathering the leather coat around her shoulders as she realized how cold the morning air still was. "They wanted my jewelry, my father's watch. I refused to hand it over, and when the stagecoach was attacked," her voice faltered, "everyone else was killed. I ran when they were distracted with the strongbox." Owen approached cautiously, offering her a canteen. "You're a brave woman, Miss Reynolds, Sophia Reynolds." She accepted the canteen gratefully, taking small sips as he'd indicated. "I was traveling to Helena. I'm to be the new schoolteacher there." A smile quirked the corner of Owen's mouth, softening the hard planes of his face. "Helena's still a good 2 days' ride from here, Miss Reynolds, and I reckon those bandits haven't given up their search for you." Sophia's hand went instinctively to the small pocket sewn into her petticoat, where her father's gold watch still rested. "It was his final gift to me before the influenza took him. I couldn't." "No need to explain." Owen held up a hand, "but we need to get moving. The Blackwell Gang isn't known for giving up easily, and I mean to see you safely to Helena." Sophia rose shakily to her feet, wincing as her body protested the movement. Every muscle ached from her desperate flight the day before, and her feet were blistered and raw inside her impractical boots. Owen noticed her discomfort immediately. "There's a trapper's cabin about 3 miles from here. We can rest there, tend to your injuries, and make a plan." He hesitated, then added, "Can you ride, Miss Reynolds?" Sophia squared her shoulders. "I grew up riding in Boston Common, deputy." I assure you I can manage. The ghost of a smile crossed Owen's face again. Boston, is it? Long way from home. Home is where one makes it, Deputy McCready. Sophia handed him back his coat, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance and the intimacy of having slept beneath his garment. And I am very grateful for your assistance. Owen nodded, his expression growing serious. 3 miles to safety, then. Let's not waste daylight. He helped her mount his stallion, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Sophia tried to ignore the unfamiliar flutter in her chest at his touch. The deputy was simply doing his job, she reminded herself. She was a responsibility, nothing more. Owen led the horse on foot, rifle ready, his eyes constantly scanning the surrounding forest. Sophia watched the way he moved, confident yet alert, like a predator in his natural domain. The mountains seemed to recognize him as one of their own, wild and untamed despite the badge on his chest. "How long have you been a lawman, deputy?" she asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "Going on 5 years now," he replied without turning. "Started as a town sheriff down in Colorado, moved up to the Marshal Service 2 years back. And before that," his shoulders stiffened slightly, "cavalry, Union Army, fought at Shiloh and Vicksburg." Sophia nodded, though he couldn't see her. Her father had supported the Union cause financially, but like most privileged Bostonians, had remained distant from the actual fighting. She'd been just a child when the war ended, but remembered the celebrations in the streets. "I lost my brother at Antietam," she offered quietly. "Thomas." He was 18. Owen glanced back at her, something unreadable in his expression. "War took a lot of good men, Miss Reynolds. Sorry about your brother." They continued in companionable silence after that, the only sounds the creak of the saddle, the horse's steady breathing, and the whisper of wind through the pines. Sophia found herself studying the deputy's broad back, the set of his shoulders beneath his blue shirt, the way the morning light caught in his dark hair where it curled at the nape of his neck. She shook herself mentally. It was inappropriate to notice such things about a man she'd just met, a man who was simply doing his duty. Besides, Sophia had not come west to find a husband. She'd come to build a life of her own, to be valued for her mind rather than as someone's wife. The trapper's cabin appeared suddenly around a bend in the trail, a small, sturdy structure of logs and stone nestled against the side of the mountain. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and Sophia tensed. "Someone's there," she whispered urgently. Owen's hand went to his revolver. "Stay on the horse. If I signal, you ride hard back the way we came." Before Sophia could protest, the cabin door swung open and an elderly man with a flowing white beard stepped onto the porch, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "That you, McCready?" the old man called. "'Bout time you showed your face. Coffee's hot." Owen relaxed visibly, a grin spreading across his face. "Josiah, should have known you'd be up here this time of year." "Trout are running," the old man replied, as if that explained everything. His bright eyes shifted to Sophia. "And you've brought company, unusual for you. Miss Reynolds was the victim of a stagecoach robbery. Blackwell Gang, she needs shelter and rest." Josiah's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Blackwell's a nasty bunch." He lowered his shotgun and stepped aside. "Well, come in, come in. Any friend of the deputy is welcome under my roof." Owen helped Sophia dismount, his hands lingering at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Josiah Tanner is an old friend," he explained quietly. "Fought alongside my father in the Mexican War. He's as trustworthy as they come." Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of how she must look dirty, disheveled, her fine clothes torn and stained. "I must look a fright," she murmured. Owen's eyes met hers, unexpectedly warm. "You look like a survivor, Miss Reynolds. That's nothing to be ashamed of." Something in his gaze made her breath catch, but before she could respond, Josiah was ushering them inside the cabin. The interior was surprisingly cozy, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and shelves lined with books that seemed out of place in such a rustic setting. A pot of coffee bubbled on the hearth, filling the air with its rich aroma. "Sit, sit," Josiah insisted, pulling out a chair for Sophia. "You look dead on your feet, young lady." Sophia sank gratefully into the offered seat, suddenly aware of just how exhausted she still was. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Tanner." Just Josiah, miss. Nobody's called me mister in 40 years. He poured coffee into tin cups and set one before her. Now, what's this about the Blackwell Gang? While Owen explained the situation, Josiah busied himself pulling supplies from various cupboards and shelves. He set a basin of warm water before Sophia along with a clean cloth. "For your face and hands, miss," he said kindly. "And I believe my late wife left some clothing that might suit you." Nothing fancy, mind, but clean and whole. Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes at the simple kindness. "You're very generous, sir." Josiah waved away her thanks. "Martha would have my hide if I didn't offer proper hospitality. Now you two rest up, I'll keep watch." Owen shook his head. "The Blackwells could be tracking us. You should rest," Josiah interrupted firmly. "Been tracking them for days, by the look of you. I'm old, but my eyes are sharp and my trigger fingers sharper. 4 hours sleep, then we'll talk strategy." Owen looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. 4 hours, then we need to move. Helena's still a long ride away." Sophia cleaned her face and hands, the warm water a luxury she hadn't expected to find in this wilderness. Josiah showed her to a small side room where she changed into the offered clothing, a simple blue calico dress that was a bit large but mercifully clean. When she emerged, Owen was seated at the table, studying a map spread before him. "There's a bed through there," Josiah told her, pointing to another door. "You should rest while you can." Sophia hesitated, looking at Owen. "What about you?" "I'll take the chair," he said without looking up from the map. "Used to sleeping rough." "Nonsense," Josiah interjected. "Bed's big enough for two and you're both adults. Deputy can sleep on top of the covers if propriety is a concern." Sophia felt her cheeks flush hot. "I couldn't possibly, it's practical," Owen cut in, his voice matter of fact. "We both need rest, and sitting up won't give me what I need to keep you safe later." His eyes met hers, clear and direct. "I'll respect your boundaries, Miss Reynolds. You have my word." The flush spread down Sophia's neck. In Boston, the mere suggestion would have been scandalous. But this wasn't Boston, and their circumstances were far from ordinary. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Very well, Deputy. Practical it is." The bedroom was small but neat, with a patchwork quilt covering the bed and a small window offering a view of the mountains beyond. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, removing her ruined boots with a wince. Owen entered a moment later, carrying a small tin of salve. "For your feet," he explained, setting it beside her. "Josiah's wife was a healer. Her remedies work better than any doctor's." "Thank you." Sophia opened the tin, the sharp herbal scent filling the air. She hesitated, suddenly aware of the intimacy of applying the salve with Owen present. As if reading her thoughts, he turned away. "I'll step out while you tend to yourself. Call when you're settled." When he returned, Sophia was under the quilt, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder. Owen removed his boots and gun belt, hanging the latter on the bedpost within easy reach. He stretched out on top of the quilt, careful to maintain a respectful distance between them. "You should sleep," he said quietly. "Josiah will wake us if there's trouble." Sophia turned on her side to face him, studying his profile in the dim light filtering through the window. "Why are you helping me, Deputy McCready? Surely escorting a schoolteacher to Helena isn't part of your duties." Owen was silent for a long moment. "My sister wanted to be a teacher," he said finally. "Brightest girl you ever met. She had plans to go east for proper schooling, died of typhoid before she got the chance." "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered. He shrugged, the movement subtle against the quilt. "Long time ago now, but I respect what you're doing, Miss Reynolds. Takes courage to leave everything familiar behind and start fresh." "Sophia," she said impulsively, "if we're to share a bed, however innocently, you might as well use my Christian name." Owen turned his head to look at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sophia," he repeated, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue, "it suits you, and may I call you Owen? You may." His eyes held hers for a beat longer than necessary before he looked away. "Now sleep, Sophia. The road ahead is long and likely dangerous." Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow in coming. Sophia was acutely aware of the man beside her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body. It had been years since she'd been this close to any man not related to her by blood, and never in such intimate circumstances. Yet there was something comforting about Owen's presence, something that made her feel safe despite the danger that still pursued them. As she finally drifted toward sleep, Sophia realized that for the first time since the stagecoach attack, she wasn't afraid. When Sophia awoke, the quality of light through the window had changed, suggesting several hours had passed. She was alone in the bed, the quilt tucked carefully around her shoulders. Voices drifted from the main room, Owen and Josiah in quiet conversation. Moving northwest based on the tracks, Owen was saying. But they'll circle back when they lose her trail. You could stay here, Josiah suggested. Cabin's defensible, wait them out. Too risky. If they find us, we're trapped. Better to keep moving, reach the settlement at Copper Creek by nightfall. Sophia rose quietly, wincing as her feet touched the floor. The salve had helped, but her blisters were far from healed. She arranged her borrowed dress as best she could and stepped into the main room. Both men looked up at her entrance. Owen's gaze lingered for a moment, something unreadable in his expression before he returned his attention to the map on the table. Miss Reynolds, Josiah greeted her warmly, feeling better after your rest. Much thank you. Sophia moved to join them at the table. What's our plan? Deputy thinks you should push on to Copper Creek, Josiah explained, pouring her a fresh cup of coffee. Small settlement about 15 miles from here. They've got a proper boarding house where you can stay while he deals with the Blackwells. Sophia frowned. Deals with them. You mean you intend to confront them alone? Owen didn't look up from the map. It's my job, Sophia. I can't let them continue terrorizing this territory. But they outnumber you. Surely that's suicide. I'm not planning to face them head-on, he replied, his tone patient. Track them back to their hideout, observe their patterns, then bring in reinforcements from Helena. Sophia wasn't convinced. And what happens to me while you're playing scout? Am I to sit in Copper Creek waiting to hear if you've been killed? Owen's eyes flashed to hers, surprise evident in their blue depths. You'd be safe there. The town has a sheriff and no one would connect you to me. Unless the Blackwells followed us there, Sophia countered. In which case I become a target again without your protection. Josiah chuckled, earning a glare from Owen. She's got a point, son. Owen ran a hand through his hair in frustration. What would you suggest, then? I can't take you with me to track dangerous criminals, and I can't abandon my duty to escort you all the way to Helena. Sophia straightened her spine. Why not both? We continue to Helena as planned. Along the way, you watch for signs of the Blackwells. If you find their trail, we alert the marshal's office in Helena and return with proper reinforcements. The two men stared at her. Josiah broke into a wide grin. I like her, McCready, sharp as a tack. Owen's expression was harder to read. He studied Sophia for a long moment before nodding slowly. It could work. The road to Helena passes near where I suspect their hideout might be. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. You're not what I expected, Sophia Reynolds. I'll take that as a compliment, Deputy. Sophia sipped her coffee, pleased with herself. When do we leave? Within the hour, Owen decided. Josiah, can you spare any supplies? Our journey will take at least 2 days. The old trapper was already moving around the cabin, gathering items into a canvas bag. Jerky, hardtack, coffee. Martha's old riding clothes might fit the lady better for the journey. Soon Sophia found herself dressed in practical buckskin trousers and a loose cotton shirt beneath a wool jacket. The clothes had belonged to Josiah's wife, who had apparently been as unconventional as her husband. The outfit was far more suitable for riding than either her ruined dress or the borrowed calico. They suit you, Owen commented when she emerged from the bedroom. Practical. Sophia smoothed her hands over the unfamiliar sensation of trousers. My mother would faint dead away if she could see me now. A smile curved her lips. I rather like that thought. Owen's laugh was unexpected, deep and genuine, transforming his serious face. You're full of surprises, schoolteacher. Josiah provided them with an extra horse, a steady mare named Marigold, so they wouldn't have to double up on Owen's stallion. After heartfelt thanks and promises to return the borrowed items, they set off toward the main trail that would eventually lead them to Helena. The day was clear and cool, the mountain air crisp in Sophia's lungs as they rode. Owen remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, but he seemed more relaxed than before. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or wildlife to Sophia, his deep voice painting the landscape with history and meaning. "Those peaks to the north are what the Blackfeet call the backbone of the world," he told her as they paused to rest the horses beside a swift-flowing stream. "Legend says they were formed when the Great Spirit lay down to rest after creating the earth." Sophia watched the sunlight play across the distant mountains. "It's beautiful, different from anything I've ever seen. Different from Boston, I imagine, in every possible way." Sophia dipped her fingers in the cold stream. "I thought I knew what to expect when I came west. Books, you know. Dime novels and travel accounts, none of them captured." She gestured to the panorama before them. "The immensity of it," Owen suggested. "The way it makes you feel both insignificant and part of something greater at the same time." Sophia looked at him with new appreciation. "Exactly that." "You have a poet's soul, Deputy McCready." A flush of color touched his tan cheeks. "Don't let that get around. Bad for my reputation." They continued their journey, the trail gradually descending from the high country toward more populated valleys. By late afternoon, they came upon signs of recent passage, fresh hoofprints in the soft earth of the trail. Owen dismounted to examine them, his expression growing grim. "3 riders heading east, moving fast." He looked up at Sophia. "Could be the men who were tracking you." Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "How recent? Few hours at most." Owen swung back into his saddle. "We'll leave the main trail, follow the creek for a while. It'll slow us down, but harder to track." They diverted their course, picking their way carefully along the rocky creek bed. The sun was low on the horizon when Owen finally called a halt in a small, sheltered hollow surrounded by boulders and scrub pine. "We'll camp here tonight," he decided. Defensible position, and the rocks will hide a small fire. As Owen tended to the horses, Sophia gathered wood for their fire, grateful for the practical knowledge her brother had shared during childhood summers spent at their family's country home. By the time Owen returned, she had a neat pile of kindling and larger branches arranged. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Impressive. Didn't figure Boston ladies for woodcraft. My brother taught me," Sophia explained, a familiar pang of grief accompanying the memory. "Thomas believed girls should know practical skills, not just embroidery and piano." Sounds like a wise man. Owen knelt to start the fire, his movements efficient and practiced. "You mentioned he died at Antietam," Sophia nodded, watching the spark catch in the kindling. "He was so proud to enlist. Father tried to buy him a commission, but Thomas insisted on serving as a regular infantry soldier, said it was the principle of the thing." She smiled sadly. "He was always principled, even as a boy. The best soldiers usually are." Owen fed the growing flame carefully. "Not fighting for glory or adventure, but because they believe in something greater. Were you like that when you joined the Union Army?" Owen was quiet for a moment, arranging larger branches on the fire. "I was young. 17, lied about my age, thought it would be an adventure." His voice grew distant. "Shiloh cured me of that notion pretty quick." The fire crackled between them, casting flickering shadows across their faces. Sophia studied Owen's profile, seeing the echoes of past horrors in his eyes. Without thinking, she reached across the space between them and placed her hand on his. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Owen's gaze dropped to their joined hands, surprise evident in his expression before it softened into something warmer. He turned his palm up, his fingers curling gently around hers. "Long time ago," he said quietly, "but thank you." They remained like that for a moment, connected by touch and shared understanding. Then Owen cleared his throat and withdrew his hand, turning his attention to their supplies. "We should eat," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Need to keep up our strength." They shared a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and coffee. As darkness settled around their small camp, the stars emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear mountain air. "I've never seen stars like this," Sophia murmured, leaning back against her saddle to gaze upward. "In Boston, the city lights and coal smoke obscure all but the brightest." Owen settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him without touching. "That's one thing I missed during the war and later when I was sheriff in mining towns." The stars, out here, they're like old friends. Do you know the constellations? Some. Owen pointed upward. There's the North Star, and there, that's Cassiopeia the Queen in her chair. And that bright one? Venus. The evening star. Sophia turned her head to look at him, surprised. You know astronomy as well. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. My father was a surveyor before the Mexican War, taught me to navigate by the stars. He glanced at her. What about you? What did your father teach you? Business, mainly. The value of investments, how to read a contract, the importance of diversification. Sophia smiled at the memory. He had no sons left after Thomas died, so he decided his daughter would learn the family business instead. Unusual man, your father. Yes, he believed women were just as capable as men given the opportunity. Sophia sighed. Not a popular opinion in Boston society. Mother was mortified when he insisted I attend financial discussions. And yet you chose teaching over business. Sophia watched the firelight dancing across the rugged plains of Owen's face. I wanted to make a difference, to shape young minds rather than portfolios. She hesitated. And I wanted to go somewhere I could be valued for my abilities, not pitied as poor Thomas Reynolds' spinster sister. Owen's gaze was thoughtful. Helena's fortunate to be getting you then. Warmth spread through Sophia's chest at his words. Thank you. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with the crackling of the fire and the distant calls of night creatures. Sophia found herself stealing glances at Owen, noticing the way the firelight caught in his dark hair, the strong line of his jaw, the capable hands that had saved her life. I'll take first watch, Owen said eventually, breaking the spell of the moment. You should get some sleep. We'll have another long day tomorrow. Sophia wanted to protest to extend this peaceful interlude, but exhaustion was already tugging at her limbs. Wake me for the second watch. I'm perfectly capable of keeping guard. Owen looked like he might argue, but then nodded. All right. 4 hours, then I'll wake you. Sophia rolled herself in the blanket Josiah had provided, using her saddle as a pillow. The last thing she saw before closing her eyes was Owen's silhouette against the star-filled sky, steady and watchful. She dreamed of Boston drawing rooms transformed into wild mountain meadows, of proper gentlemen in tailcoats replaced by a single figure with sky-blue eyes and strong, gentle hands. When Owen shook her awake for her watch, Sophia emerged from sleep with lingering confusion about where and when she was. Everything quiet? She asked, sitting up and rubbing sleep from her eyes. Owen nodded. No sign of trouble, he hesitated. You don't have to take watch if you're too tired. I'm perfectly capable, Sophia replied, more sharply than she'd intended. Sorry, I want to do my part. A smile ghosted across his face. Never doubted your capability, Sophia, just your need for sleep. I've slept enough. She stood, accepting the rifle he handed her. Rest now. I'll wake you at first light. Owen nodded, settling onto the ground in the spot she'd vacated, the blanket still warm from her body. If you hear or see anything unusual, wake me immediately. Don't investigate on your own. I understand. As Owen closed his eyes, Sophia moved to sit on a boulder at the edge of their camp, rifle across her lap. The night was peaceful, the only sounds the gentle rustling of wind through the pines and the occasional call of an owl. The fire had burned down to embers, casting just enough light for her to see the immediate surroundings. The stars continued their slow wheel overhead as Sophia kept watch. She found herself studying Owen's sleeping form, the way tension seemed to leave his body in repose, making him appear younger, more vulnerable. In sleep, the hard-edged lawman gave way to the man beneath the one who noticed stars and mountain legends, who spoke of his sister with lingering grief, who had covered a stranger with his coat and stayed near to protect her. Something was happening to Sophia's carefully ordered plans for her future, something unexpected and slightly frightening in its intensity. She'd come west to be independent, to build a life centered on her work rather than a man, yet here she was, watching Owen McCready sleep and wondering what it would be like to wake beside him every morning. Foolishness, she whispered to herself. Utter foolishness. Yet when dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Sophia felt a strange reluctance to wake Owen and end her vigil. She allowed him a few extra minutes of peace before gently touching his shoulder. Owen, she said softly, The sun's rising. His eyes opened immediately, clear and alert, no trace of sleep's confusion in them. For a moment he simply looked at her, something unguarded in his gaze that made Sophia's breath catch. Then he sat up, the moment passing as he reached for his hat. Any trouble? None. Peaceful night. They broke camp quickly, sharing the last of Josiah's coffee and hardtack before saddling the horses. As Owen helped Sophia mount Marigold, his hands at her waist, she was acutely aware of his touch even through layers of clothing. "Should reach Copper Creek by midday," Owen told her as they set off. "We can resupply there, maybe get word to the marshal's office in Helena about the Blackwells." The morning passed uneventfully as they followed a narrow trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine. The terrain gradually became less rugged, the mountains giving way to rolling foothills. By the time the sun was high overhead, they could see smoke from chimneys in the distance. "Copper Creek," Owen confirmed, "small but growing. Started as a mining camp 5 years ago, but they've got a proper street now, even a church." As they approached the settlement, Sophia felt a curious mixture of relief and regret. Relief at the prospect of civilization after days in the wilderness, but regret that her time alone with Owen was coming to an end. Copper Creek proved to be a single dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various businesses catering to miners and ranchers. Curious eyes followed them as Owen led the way to the sheriff's office, a small clapboard building with a wooden star hanging above the door. The sheriff was a grizzled man named Patterson who greeted Owen with wary respect. "McCready, been a while. Heard you made Deputy Marshal." "News travels fast," Owen replied, shaking the man's hand. "Sheriff, this is Miss Sophia Reynolds on her way to Helena to take up a teaching position. Miss Reynolds, Sheriff William Patterson." Patterson tipped his hat to Sophia. "Madam, don't often see ladies of quality passing through." Sophia smiled politely. "A pleasure, Sheriff." Owen quickly explained their situation: the stagecoach robbery, the Blackwell Gang, their journey to Helena. Patterson's weathered face grew increasingly grim. "Blackwells hit the stage out of Bannack last week too," he revealed. "Killed everyone aboard, including a woman and child. Governor's putting pressure on the marshal's office to bring them in." Owen's jaw tightened. "Any word on where they're holed up?" "Rumors say they've got a camp up in the Tobacco Root Mountains, old mining claim called the Lucky Strike. Abandoned years ago, but the buildings are still standing." Sophia watched Owen absorb this information, seeing the calculations happening behind his eyes. "How far from here?" "Day's ride, maybe more." Patterson glanced at Sophia. "Not the sort of place for a lady, McCready." "No," Owen agreed, "it isn't." He turned to Sophia. "I need to go after them." Though she'd been expecting it, the words still struck Sophia like a physical blow. "Alone, that's madness." "I'll send a telegram to Helena from here, request backup," Owen explained, "but I can't let them slip away." "Not after what they've done." "Then I'm coming with you," Sophia declared. Both men stared at her as if she'd suggested flying to the moon. Patterson recovered first, chuckling as if she'd made a joke. "No offense, madam, but that's not possible." "I wasn't asking your permission, Sheriff," Sophia replied coolly. She turned to Owen. "You promised to see me safely to Helena. I'm holding you to that promise." Owen's expression was torn between admiration and frustration. "Sophia, be reasonable. This is dangerous work." "I can't protect you and track the Blackwells at the same time." "I don't need protection," she insisted. "I can ride, I can shoot, yes. Don't look so surprised. My brother taught me, and I've already demonstrated I can survive in the wilderness. The logical solution is for me to accompany you to this Lucky Strike mine, observe from a safe distance while you verify the Blackwell's presence, then continue with you to Helena, where we can organize a proper posse." Patterson was looking between them with undisguised fascination. "She always liked this, McCready, apparently," Owen muttered. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Sophia, it's too dangerous. Stay here in Copper Creek. The hotel's clean and safe. I'll return for you after I've scouted the mine." "And if you don't return?" "If the Blackwells capture or kill you, what then?" Sophia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I've already lost everyone else I cared for, Owen. I won't sit in a hotel room wondering if you're dead or alive." The words hung between them, revealing more than Sophia had intended. She saw the moment Owen registered their significance, his eyes widening slightly. "You've known me 3 days," he said quietly. "And in those 3 days, you've shown more consideration for my welfare than most men I've known my entire life," Sophia replied. "I'm coming with you, that's final." Owen stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Finally, he nodded. "On one condition, you follow my instructions without question when we're near the mine. If I say hide, you hide. If I say run, you run, no arguments, agreed." Patterson cleared his throat loudly. "Well, now that's settled, maybe you two would like to use my office to clean up before you head out. Got a washroom in the back, and the missus can bring over some food from our place." Sophia realized they must look a sight trail worn and dusty, Owen with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. "That's very kind, Sheriff, thank you." While Owen sent telegrams to the marshal's office in Helena and visited the general store for supplies, Sophia gratefully used the sheriff's washroom to freshen up. Mrs. Patterson, a motherly woman with kind eyes, brought over a basket of food and insisted on brushing and rebraiding Sophia's copper hair. "Been a while since I had a girl's hair to fix," she explained as her fingers worked deftly. "Our daughters are grown and gone to California." "You're very kind," Sophia said, enjoying the simple human contact after days of hardship. "I'm afraid I'm imposing on your hospitality." "Nonsense. It's nice to see the deputy with someone." Mrs. Patterson secured the braid with a ribbon from her pocket. "He's a good man. Carries too much on his shoulders, if you ask me. You know him well." "Known him since he first came to the territory. Stayed with us when he was tracking the Dobson brothers a few years back. Never seen a man so driven by duty." The older woman's eyes met Sophia's in the small mirror. "Or so alone." Before Sophia could respond, Owen returned, freshly shaved and carrying saddlebags filled with supplies. Something in her expression must have caught his attention, for his brow furrowed slightly. "Everything all right, fine," Sophia assured him, rising from her seat. "Mrs. Patterson was kind enough to help me with my hair." "Looks nice," Owen said, the compliment obviously unpracticed but sincere. He turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Thank you for your hospitality, madam. Any time, deputy, you two be careful out there." By mid-afternoon, they were on the trail again, heading northwest toward the Tobacco Root Mountains. Their horses were refreshed, their supplies replenished, and Sophia wore a clean shirt provided by Mrs. Patterson. The only outward sign of their ordeal was a new wariness in Owen's demeanor as they rode. "We'll approach the Lucky Strike from the east," he explained as they made their way through a narrow valley. "There's an old hunting trail that should give us cover to observe without being seen." "How many men are we likely to encounter?" Sophia asked, keeping her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Reports put the Blackwell Gang at 7 men, but some may be elsewhere, scouting, hunting, or causing trouble." Owen glanced at her, having second thoughts. "No," Sophia replied firmly, "just gathering information." A smile ghosted across his face. "The school teacher in you, perhaps, or perhaps my father's daughter. He always said knowledge was the best preparation for any venture." They made camp that night in a small clearing beside a stream. The routine was becoming familiar, gathering wood, building a fire, sharing a simple meal beneath the stars. But something had shifted between them, an awareness that hummed in the air like static before a storm. As they sat beside the fire, Owen cleaning his revolver while Sophia mended a tear in her sleeve, she found herself studying him with new eyes. Not as her rescuer or protector, but as a man complex, principled, carrying wounds both visible and hidden. "Tell me about your family," she said suddenly. "You mentioned a sister who wanted to be a teacher. Were there others?" Owen's hands stilled on the gun. 3 sisters, all younger. Mary was the oldest, then Sarah and Beth. I was the only boy. And your parents? Father died at Chapultepec during the Mexican War. Mother remarried a few years later, a banker from St. Louis. His voice held no emotion. Decent enough man, provided well. But not a father to you. Owen reassembled his revolver with practiced movements. I was 13 when they married, already half wild, according to my mother. He tried, I suppose, but we never found common ground. And your sisters, are they still in St. Louis? Mary died of typhoid at 16. Sarah married a doctor, lives in Denver now. Beth joined one of those women's colleges back east. A small smile touched his lips. She writes occasionally. Studying botany or some such. Sophia tried to imagine him as a boy, the only son in a house of girls, fatherless, restless. You were close to Mary. It wasn't a question, but Owen nodded. She was the peacemaker, kept me out of trouble or tried to. His eyes met Sophia's across the fire. Reminds me of you sometimes, that same determination. The comparison warmed her unexpectedly. I would have liked to meet her. She would have liked you. Owen holstered his revolver and leaned back against his saddle. What about you? Any family besides the brother you lost? Just my parents, both gone now, father to heart failure, mother to influenza the same winter it took Thomas. Sophia set aside her mending. I'm the last of the Reynolds line, at least our branch of it. No cousins or aunts pressuring you to marry, Sophia laughed softly. Oh, dozens. Boston society abhors an unmarried woman with property. I had 3 proposals before my mother was even in the ground, all from men who'd never shown the slightest interest in me before I inherited. Owen's expression darkened. Vultures, indeed. Their interest cooled considerably when they learned most of the estate was tied up in a trust with very specific conditions. Sophia smiled at the memory. Father knew exactly what would happen when he was gone. The trust ensures I control my inheritance, married or not. Smart man. Yes. Sophia gazed into the fire. He wanted me to be independent, to choose a path and a husband if I wanted one based on my own desires, not financial necessity. Owen was watching her, something unreadable in his expression. And what are your desires, Sophia Reynolds, besides teaching in Helena? The question hung in the air between them, charged with meaning beyond the simple words. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. I want a life of purpose, she said finally. I want to make a difference in the world, however small, and if I marry. She hesitated, then met his eyes directly. I want a partnership of equals, mutual respect, shared dreams. Not common in my experience, Owen said quietly, nor in mine. Sophia held his gaze, but then I've never been particularly concerned with what's common. The corner of Owen's mouth lifted in a half-smile. I've noticed. The silence between them vibrated with unspoken possibilities. Sophia was acutely aware of how alone they were, how far from the constraints and judgments of society. In Boston, a woman in her position would be ruined merely by the suggestion of such unchaperoned time with a man. Here, those rules seemed as distant as the city itself. We should rest, Owen said finally, breaking the spell. Tomorrow will be challenging. Sophia nodded, though sleep seemed unlikely with her pulse still racing from their conversation. I'll take first watch tonight. No need. I've set snares around the perimeter. Anything larger than a rabbit tries to approach will hear it. They settled on opposite sides of the fire, each wrapped in their blankets, but Sophia felt the distance between them as a tangible thing, a space filled with unspoken words and unfulfilled yearnings. As she drifted toward sleep, she wondered if Owen felt it too. Dawn brought a heavy mist that clung to the valleys and hollows, shrouding the landscape in ghostly white. They broke camp silently, the weight of the day's mission settling over them. The Lucky Strike mine lay somewhere ahead, and with it, the dangerous men who had already tried to kill Sophia once. Stay close, Owen instructed as they picked their way along a faint trail that wound upward through stands of lodgepole pine. Visibility's poor in this mist, but it works in our favor, harder for lookouts to spot us. They rode single file, the horses' hooves muffled by the carpet of pine needles. Sophia focused on Owen's back, the set of his shoulders beneath his blue shirt, the rifle balanced across his saddle. He was in his element here, reading the wilderness like a book, every sense alert to potential danger. By mid-morning, the mist had burned away, revealing a landscape of rocky slopes and stunted trees. Owen raised his hand in a signal to halt, then dismounted and helped Sophia down from her horse. We'll continue on foot from here, he said quietly. Less chance of being spotted, the mine should be just over that ridge. They secured the horses in a small copse of trees, taking only essential supplies, Owen's rifle and revolver. a canteen of water, and the small spyglass he'd purchased in Copper Creek. Sophia felt oddly vulnerable without Marigold, as if the horse had been a talisman against harm. "Stay behind me," Owen reminded her as they began the slow, careful ascent of the ridge. "And remember your promise, you follow my instructions without question." "I remember." They moved with painstaking care, using boulders and scrub for cover, freezing in place at the slightest unusual sound. The sun beat down on them, and Sophia's shirt clung to her back with perspiration by the time they reached a position near the top of the ridge. Owen gestured for her to stay low as he edged forward to peer over the top. After a moment, he motioned for Sophia to join him, indicating she should move carefully. The view beyond the ridge made her breath catch. A small valley opened below them, sheltered on three sides by steep, rocky slopes. At its center stood a collection of weathered buildings, a large structure that must have been the mine office, several smaller cabins, and what appeared to be a stable. A stream ran along one edge of the clearing, and several horses were picketed near it. "Count 5 men," Owen whispered, passing her the spyglass. "2 by the main building, 1 at the stable, 2 by the stream." Sophia raised the glass to her eye, adjusting it carefully. The magnification brought the scene into sharp focus. The men lounging in front of the main building were playing cards, rifles propped against the wall beside them. The man by the stable was cleaning tack, while the 2 by the stream appeared to be washing clothes. "Domestic," she murmured. "Outlaws are people too," Owen replied. "They eat, sleep, get their clothes dirty just like anyone else." "I don't see John Blackwell," Sophia said, scanning the area again. "No, might be inside or away." Owen took the spyglass back, studying the layout. "This confirms Patterson's information, at least. This is definitely their hideout." "What now?" "Now we retreat carefully back to the horses, then ride hard for Helena to organize a proper posse." Owen's expression was grim. "As much as I'd like to bring them in myself, the odds are too long, and I've got you to consider." Sophia felt a surge of relief mingled with admiration for his pragmatism. A wise decision. They began the careful descent, moving even more slowly than they had on the way up. Every loose stone, every snapping twig seemed magnified in the quiet air. They were halfway down when a shout from above froze them in place. "Someone's coming up the other side," a voice called. Owen's reaction was instantaneous. He pushed Sophia behind a large boulder, his body shielding hers as he drew his revolver. "Stay down," he whispered. "No matter what happens, stay hidden." Before she could protest, he was moving away, circling to the left to draw attention from her position. Sophia pressed herself against the rough stone, heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. The sound of horses approaching from the direction of their own mounts made her stomach clench with dread. They'd been discovered, possibly by Blackwell himself, returning to the hideout. Owen was now caught between the men in the camp and whoever was coming up the trail. A gunshot cracked the air, followed by a shout and the thunder of running feet. Sophia peered around the edge of the boulder in time to see Owen diving for cover as bullets kicked up dust around him. 3 men on horseback were approaching from below, while 2 figures from the camp were making their way down the slope. "It's the marshal," one of the newcomers shouted. "John, it's that deputy who's been tracking us, John Blackwell." The leader himself had returned, and now Owen was caught in a deadly trap. Sophia watched in horror as he returned fire from his position behind a stunted pine, forcing the men on horseback to scatter for cover. But he was outnumbered and exposed, with enemies approaching from 2 directions. Without conscious thought, Sophia found herself moving, staying low and using the scattered boulders for cover as she worked her way toward where they'd left the horses. Owen had taught her enough about tracking that she could follow their earlier path. If she could reach the horses, create a diversion. The gunfire continued behind her, spurring her to greater speed. Sophia scrambled down the slope, ignoring the sting as branches whipped her face and hands. She could hear men shouting, the occasional cry of pain telling her that Owen was giving as good as he got. Finally, she reached the copse where they'd left the horses. Both animals were agitated by the gunfire, but still secured where they'd left them. Sophia untied Marigold first, then Owen's stallion. Mounting quickly, she took the reins of both horses and tried to remember everything Owen had taught her about riding in rough country. "Please work," she whispered, then dug her heels into Marigold's sides and let out the loudest, most piercing scream she could muster. The effect was immediate. Both horses surged forward, startled by the sound and eager to escape the gunfire. Sophia guided them in a wide arc that would bring them up the slope from a different angle than where Owen was pinned down. All the while, she continued to scream and whoop, creating as much noise as possible. The gunfire faltered, then stopped entirely as confusion spread among the Blackwell gang. From her new vantage point, Sophia could see them looking around wildly, trying to determine if a larger force was attacking. "Owen," she shouted. Now she saw him break from cover, firing rapidly to force his attackers to duck, then sprinting toward her position. Bullets kicked up dirt around him, but none found their mark. When he reached her, Owen swung up onto his stallion in one fluid motion. "Ride," he commanded, spurring his horse forward. They thundered down the slope, taking a different trail than the one they'd ascended. Behind them, confusion gave way to organized pursuit as the Blackwells realized they'd been tricked. Gunshots echoed, but they were already out of effective range, the trees providing additional cover as they fled. Owen led them on a twisting path through the forest, crossing the stream multiple times to confuse their trail. Only when they reached a high meadow overlooking a different valley did he finally signal to slow. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, scanning Sophia with worried eyes. "No, I'm fine." Her hands were shaking with reaction, but exhilaration coursed through her veins. "Did I disobey your instructions enough, or shall I try harder next time?" For a moment, Owen stared at her in disbelief. Then a laugh burst from him, genuine and startled. "Sophia Reynolds, you are the most infuriating, brilliant woman I've ever met." Before she could respond, he leaned across the space between their horses and kissed her. His lips were warm and firm against hers, the contact brief but electrifying. When he pulled back, his eyes held a mixture of wonder and concern. "I'm sorry," he began. "That was entirely appropriate under the circumstances," Sophia finished for him, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with their escape. "Though perhaps we might try it again when we're not fleeing for our lives." A slow smile spread across Owen's face, transforming it. "I'd like that." The sound of distant hoofbeats snapped them back to the present danger. "They're still coming," Owen said, all business again. "We need to reach Helena before they catch up. It's our best chance." "How far, if we push hard, we can make it by nightfall?" Owen's expression grew serious. "It won't be an easy ride." Sophia straightened in her saddle. "I've faced worse this week. Lead on, deputy." They set a punishing pace, pushing the horses as much as they dared over the rough terrain. Owen chose their route carefully, sometimes doubling back or taking seemingly illogical turns that Sophia realized were designed to confuse any pursuers. By mid-afternoon, they'd reached more open country, the foothills giving way to the broad valley where Helena was situated. "We should be safe now," Owen said as they paused to rest the horses beside a small pond. "The Blackwells won't risk coming this close to Helena." Too many lawmen, too many witnesses. Sophia dismounted stiffly, her muscles protesting after hours in the saddle. She moved to the pond's edge, splashing cool water on her face and neck. When she straightened, she found Owen watching her, an unreadable expression in his eyes. "What you did back there," he said quietly, "it was reckless, dangerous, and completely against my instructions." Sophia raised her chin. "Yes, it also saved my life." Owen stepped closer. "Thank you, you would have done the same for me." Sophia met his gaze steadily. "In fact, you have, several times over. That's different. It's my job." "Is it only your job, Owen?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Owen's eyes darkened. "No," he admitted softly, "not anymore." He moved closer still, until barely a handspan separated them. Sophia could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the stubble darkening his jaw. When his hand came up to cup her cheek, she leaned into the touch without hesitation. "This is madness," he murmured. "We've known each other less than a week." "Some things don't require time," Sophia replied. "Only recognition." This time when Owen kissed her, there was nothing hurried or surprised about it. His lips claimed hers with deliberate intent, his arms drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest. Sophia responded with equal fervor, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, her body arching into his. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "What happens when we reach Helena? You have your teaching position waiting." "I have to return to the mountains with a posse to capture the Blackwells." Sophia traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "First things first, we reach Helena safely. We alert the marshal's office about the Blackwell Gang's location. Then," she smiled, "then we see what possibilities await us." Owen caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I like the sound of that." They remounted and continued their journey, riding side by side now that the terrain allowed it. Occasionally, their hands would reach across the space between them, fingers twining briefly before returning to the reins. No words were needed. Something profound had shifted between them, something neither had expected but both now embraced. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the buildings of Helena came into view, a proper city rising from the Montana wilderness, with church spires and brick buildings alongside rougher frontier structures. Sophia felt a curious mixture of emotions at the sight. This was her destination, the place she'd journeyed so far to reach, yet now it represented an uncertain future rather than the clean slate she'd anticipated. "The marshal's office first," Owen decided as they rode down the main street. "Then we'll find you proper accommodations." The territorial marshal, a grizzled man named James Harker, received Owen's report with growing anger. "The Blackwell Gang has been a thorn in our side for too long," he declared, pounding his desk for emphasis. "We'll ride at first light with every deputy I can muster." He turned his attention to Sophia, his weathered face softening slightly. "Miss Reynolds, the school board has been most concerned about your whereabouts. The stage was due 3 days ago. As you can see, I encountered some difficulties along the way," Sophia replied with composure that belied the events of the past week. "Deputy McCready was kind enough to ensure my safe arrival." Harker's shrewd eyes moved between them, noting something in their demeanor that brought a knowing twinkle to his gaze. "Kind, was he? Well, that's not a word often applied to McCready here, but I'll take your word for it, madam." After providing detailed information about the Lucky Strike mine and the Blackwell Gang's numbers, Owen escorted Sophia to the Helena Hotel, a respectable establishment near the center of town. The proprietress, Mrs. Holbrook, fussed over Sophia's trail-worn appearance and immediately arranged for a hot bath and fresh clothing to be sent up to her room. "The school board president, Mr. Collins, left word that he wishes to call upon you tomorrow morning," Mrs. Holbrook informed her as she showed them to a private parlor. "Shall I tell him you're available at 10? "Yes, thank you." Sophia turned to Owen as the woman departed. "Will you have left by then with the posse?" Owen nodded, regret evident in his expression. "First light." "With luck, we'll have the Blackwells in custody by tomorrow night." Sophia moved closer, propriety be damned. "Promise me you'll be careful. John Blackwell seemed a particularly dangerous man." "I'm always careful." Owen's hands came to rest at her waist. "And now I have even more reason to return safely." "Owen," Sophia began, then faltered, uncertain how to express the tumult of emotions within her. How did one put into words a connection that had formed so quickly yet felt as solid as the mountains themselves? He seemed to understand, his blue eyes soft as they met hers. "I know," he said simply. "I feel it too." Their kiss was gentle this time, a promise rather than a passion. When they parted, Owen brushed a strand of copper hair from her face with tender fingers. "I'll come find you when we return," he promised. "We'll talk about those possibilities then." Sophia nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I'll be waiting." After Owen departed, Sophia allowed herself to be led upstairs to a comfortable room where a copper bathtub awaited, steam rising invitingly from the water. As she sank into its warmth, washing away the dust and strain of her journey, she tried to make sense of how completely her expectations had been overturned. She had come west seeking independence, a life defined by her own choices rather than society's expectations. Instead, she had found Owen McCready, a man who respected her mind, admired her courage, and made her heart race with a glance. Was it possible to maintain her independence while opening her heart to him? Could she build a life that encompassed both her ambitions and this unexpected love? The word echoed in her mind as she dressed in the simple but clean clothing Mrs. Holbrook had provided. Was that what this was? This connection that had formed so rapidly in the midst of danger and hardship. It's too soon, she told her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Too sudden? Yet her heart whispered otherwise. The following morning, Sophia met with Mr. Collins, a portly gentleman with mutton-chop whiskers and an air of self-importance that reminded her of certain Boston businessmen. He expressed relief at her safe arrival and concern over her ordeal. Though Sophia noted his eyes strayed more than once to the modest ring of pearls, she wore her mother's as if assessing its value. "We've arranged temporary lodgings for you with the widow Parker until more suitable accommodations can be secured," Collins informed her. "School begins in 2 weeks, which should give you ample time to prepare your curriculum and become acquainted with our community." "Thank you, Mr. Collins. I look forward to meeting my students." "Yes, well," Collins cleared his throat, "there is one matter we should discuss. Your contract specifies certain behavioral expectations for our teachers. Helena may be a frontier town, but we pride ourselves on maintaining proper standards, particularly for those entrusted with educating our children." Sophia's spine stiffened. "I assure you, Mr. Collins, my conduct is beyond reproach." Of course. "However, your arrival in town yesterday, alone with Deputy McCready after several days in the wilderness." He let the implication hang in the air. "Tongues are already wagging, Miss Reynolds. We must consider appearances." Anger flared in Sophia's chest, hot and immediate. "Mr. Collins, I was the victim of a violent stagecoach robbery. Deputy McCready saved my life at considerable risk to his own. Any tongues wagging about impropriety would do better to concern themselves with the criminals who murdered my fellow passengers." Collins had the grace to look abashed. "Naturally, the circumstances are unusual. Still, moving forward, the board would expect you to maintain a certain distance from the deputy. His profession brings him into contact with unsavory elements, and his reputation as a, shall we say, solitary man, might reflect poorly on the school." Sophia stood, her decision made in that instant. "Mr. Collins, I find I must reconsider my acceptance of the teaching position." "What, but you've come all this way?" Collins sputtered. "Indeed I have. And in doing so, I've learned something about myself and about the kind of community in which I wish to live." Sophia's voice was steady, her resolve strengthening with each word. "I came west seeking independence and respect for my abilities. If Helena cannot offer both, if my personal associations are to be dictated by gossip and narrow-mindedness, then perhaps this is not where I belong after all." Collins rose as well, his face flushing. "Miss Reynolds, be reasonable. The board merely wishes to protect the school's reputation." "At the expense of my happiness?" Sophia shook her head. "I thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Collins, but I must decline. Good day." She left him standing open-mouthed in the hotel parlor, her heart racing but her mind clear. The boldness of her decision should have frightened her, but instead, Sophia felt oddly liberated. For the first time since leaving Boston, she was making a choice based solely on her own desires rather than others' expectations. The question now was, what next? Sophia spent the day exploring Helena, familiarizing herself with the bustling frontier city. Unlike the rough mining camps she'd heard about, Helena boasted proper streets, substantial buildings, and amenities that suggested permanence and prosperity. There were several churches, a theater, multiple hotels, and even a small lending library that particularly caught her interest. As she browsed the library's modest collection, an idea began to form. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Whitman, was delighted to find someone with Sophia's educational background interested in her establishment. "We're desperately understaffed," Mrs. Whitman confided. "The city council provides minimal funding, and most of our operations depend on volunteers. With your qualifications, you would be a tremendous asset." Are there many children who use the library? Sophia inquired. Not as many as I would like. Most are put to work as soon as they're old enough, particularly the boys. The girls fare somewhat better, but educational opportunities are limited unless their families can afford private tutoring. Mrs. Whitman sighed. The school does what it can, but with one teacher for all grades. Sophia's idea crystallized. What would you say to establishing reading classes here at the library? Not a formal school, but a place where children and perhaps adults could improve their literacy outside of regular school hours. Mrs. Whitman's eyes lit up. That would be wonderful, but we have no budget for such a position. I have my own resources, Sophia assured her. And I've always believed that education should be available to all, not just those who can afford it or conform to rigid standards. By the time she left the library, Sophia had a tentative agreement with Mrs. Whitman to establish a reading program, pending approval from the library's Board of Trustees. The prospect filled her with excitement. This was a way to use her skills and fulfill her desire to teach without the restrictions Collins and his school board would impose. The only uncertainty that remained was Owen. Would he understand her decision? Would he want to be part of the future she was beginning to envision? 4 days passed with no word from the posse that had ridden out to capture the Blackwell Gang. Sophia tried to keep busy, meeting with the library trustees, finding more permanent lodgings in a small but comfortable boarding house, and writing to her solicitor in Boston to arrange for funds to be transferred to the Helena Bank. Yet always, her thoughts returned to Owen, wondering if he was safe, if the confrontation with the Blackwells had gone as planned, if he still felt the same connection that had grown between them during their journey. On the morning of the 5th day, Sophia was arranging books in what would become her classroom at the library when the door opened, admitting a shaft of sunlight and a tall, familiar figure. I heard I might find Helena's newest librarian here, Owen said, his voice sending a thrill through her despite its weariness. Though I admit I'm surprised. Thought you'd be over at the schoolhouse by now. Sophia set down the book she was holding and turned to face him fully. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a fresh cut along his jawline, but he was whole and alive and standing before her. Plans change, she said simply. The school board and I had a difference of opinion regarding appropriate associations for their teachers. Owen's expression darkened. Collins has always been a self-important windbag. What did he say to you? Nothing worth repeating. Sophia moved closer, her eyes searching his face. You're hurt. It's nothing. Blackwell didn't come quietly. Owen's hand came up to touch the cut absently. We got them all, though. 7 men, including John himself. They'll stand trial in Helena next month. And the stolen goods. Was my father's watch recovered? A smile tugged at the corner of Owen's mouth as he reached into his pocket. Had a feeling this might be important to you. He held out his hand, and there in his palm lay her father's gold watch, its case slightly scratched but otherwise intact. Sophia took it with trembling fingers, emotion welling in her throat. Thank you, she whispered. This means more than I can say, I know. Owen's eyes held understanding. Some things are valuable beyond their worth in gold. Sophia carefully tucked the watch into her pocket, then looked up at Owen again. You said the Blackwells will stand trial next month. Will you remain in Helena until then and after? Owen's gaze was steady on hers. Marshal Harker has asked me to take over as Helena's permanent deputy marshal. Said he needs someone he can trust in the growing territorial capital. And you accepted? Sophia hardly dared breathe, told him I needed to discuss it with someone first. Owen took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Someone whose opinion matters greatly to me. Sophia's heart was hammering against her ribs. And what would you like this person's opinion on, specifically? Whether Helena might be a good place to put down roots, whether a deputy marshal's life might be compatible with certain possibilities we discussed. Owen's voice grew softer. Whether she might consider building a future alongside a man who's only now learning what it means to want something beyond duty. She would need certain assurances, Sophia replied, her own voice barely above a whisper, that her independence would be respected, that her work would be valued as much as his. He would expect nothing less. Owen's hand came up to cup her cheek. In fact, it's one of the many things he admires about her strength, her determination to forge her own path. In that case, Sophia said, leaning into his touch, I believe Helena would be an excellent place for both of them to build new lives, together. Owen's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Together, he agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that spoke of all the possibilities stretching before them. 6 months later, Sophia stood at the window of their small house on the outskirts of Helena, watching snow fall softly on the mountains beyond. The library's reading program had flourished beyond her expectations, expanding to include evening classes for adults eager to improve their literacy. Owen had settled into his role as deputy marshal, earning the respect of the community and establishing a reputation for firm but fair enforcement of the law. And 2 months ago, they had married in a simple ceremony at the Episcopal Church, with Josiah Tanner standing as Owen's best man and Mrs. Whitman as Sophia's matron of honor, not the grand Boston wedding her mother might have envisioned, but perfect in every way that mattered. The sound of the door opening pulled Sophia from her reverie. Owen stamped snow from his boots before entering, bringing with him the scent of cold air and pine. Storm's picking up, he announced, hanging his coat on the peg by the door. Might be snowed in by morning. I can think of worse fates, Sophia replied with a smile, moving to help him with his gun belt. Mrs. Erickson sent over a venison stew, and I've baked fresh bread. Owen pulled her into his arms once he was free of his outdoor gear, his kiss warm despite his cold, reddened cheeks. How did I get so lucky? Sophia laughed, leaning into his embrace. I believe it had something to do with a stagecoach robbery, a desperate flight through the wilderness, and a coat offered to a sleeping woman beneath the stars. Ah, yes. Owen's eyes crinkled at the corners. Best decision I ever made, covering you with that coat and staying near. Second best, Sophia corrected, guiding his hand to rest against her abdomen, where the first subtle swell of their child was beginning to show. This might surpass it. Owen's expression softened with wonder, as it did each time they acknowledged the new life growing within her. A family of our own, he murmured. Never thought I'd have that. Nor I, Sophia admitted, but it seems the Montana Territory had plans for both of us that we never anticipated. Later, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl around their snug cabin, Sophia rested her head on Owen's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. From Boston society lady to frontier librarian, from solitary traveler to beloved wife, and soon-to-be mother, her journey had taken turns she could never have predicted. Any regrets? Owen asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns in her copper hair spread across the pillow. Sophia raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes, finding in them the same steadfast love that had grown from those first tentative connections forged in danger and hardship. Not one, she replied with absolute certainty. Every step, every challenge led me here to you, to us. How could I regret any of it? Owen pulled her down for a kiss that still held the power to make her heart race. To us, he echoed, and all the adventures yet to come. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their small corner of the wild Montana wilderness in pristine white. But within the walls of their home, Sophia and Owen had created a warmth that no winter could touch, a love born under starlight, nurtured through peril, and now flourishing in the life they were building together, one day at a time.